In the heart of Nashville, a man believed he had cracked the code to the perfect crime. For months, Nathaniel Blackwood orchestrated heists with surgical precision, leaving no trace, no witnesses, and no evidence. Law enforcement was baffled, but genius has a fatal flaw: arrogance. And sometimes the very technology that makes you untouchable becomes the trap that seals your fate. This is the story of how a single phone tap brought down the criminal mastermind who thought he was smarter than everyone else. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of First National Bank of Nashville as closing time approached. At exactly 4:47 p.m., Nathaniel Blackwood adjusted his expensive silk tie and walked through the marble lobby with the confidence of a man who owned the world. To everyone present, he appeared to be just another wealthy businessman conducting routine transactions. But behind his piercing blue eyes and charming smile lay the mind of a criminal genius. Blackwood had spent 3 months studying every detail of this moment. He knew that security guard Robert Mitchell would be checking the rear entrance at precisely 4:50 p.m. He knew that teller Sandra Williams always counted her drawer twice before closing. He knew that the security cameras had a blind spot near the executive offices, a flaw in the system that no one else had noticed, but he had discovered during his reconnaissance. What happened next would later be called the most sophisticated bank robbery in Tennessee history, yet not a single alarm sounded during the crime. As Mitchell made his rounds, Blackwood approached the main counter with a leather briefcase and a forged withdrawal slip worth exactly $2.3 million, an amount carefully calculated to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. His psychological manipulation was masterful. He engaged Sandra Williams in casual conversation about her daughter's college plans, creating a personal connection that would make her less likely to question his unusual request. "I apologize for the timing," Blackwood said with practiced sincerity, "but I'm flying to Switzerland tonight for emergency medical treatment. Family matters, you understand." His story was elaborate but believable, complete with fabricated medical documents and a fake passport bearing his alias. Williams never suspected that the charming gentleman before her was systematically exploiting every weakness in the bank security protocol. While she processed his request, Blackwood used a small device hidden in his briefcase to temporarily disable the silent alarm system, a piece of technology he had acquired through connections in his criminal network. The entire operation lasted exactly 11 minutes and 37 seconds. Blackwood walked out with the money, leaving behind no fingerprints, no DNA evidence, and no electronic trail. The bank's security footage would later show nothing more than a well-dressed man conducting legitimate business. By the time the theft was discovered the following morning, Nathaniel Blackwood had vanished like smoke in the Tennessee wind. But this was only the beginning of his reign of terror across Nashville's financial district. Over the next 6 months, he would execute 4 more similar operations, each one more daring than the last, each one cementing his reputation as the ghost who could steal millions without leaving a trace. The media dubbed him the Nashville Phantom, but law enforcement had no leads, no suspects, and no idea they were dealing with a criminal mastermind whose intellect far exceeded their investigative capabilities. Blackwood read every newspaper article about his crimes with the satisfaction of an artist admiring his own masterpiece. He believed he had achieved something no criminal before him had accomplished, the perfect crime, repeated at will. But perfection, as Detective Sarah Mackenzie would soon discover, was nothing more than an illusion created by a man whose greatest weakness was his absolute belief in his own superiority. Detective Sarah Mackenzie stood in the rain outside First National Bank at 6:30 a.m., her coffee growing cold as she studied the crime scene with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient. While other investigators had already concluded this was the work of the Nashville Phantom, Mackenzie saw something they had missed, subtle details that suggested a pattern far more complex than anyone realized. With 15 years of experience in criminal psychology and a master's degree in behavioral analysis from Vanderbilt University, Mackenzie had built her reputation on solving cases that others considered impossible. She specialized in hunting intelligent killers and criminal masterminds, understanding that the most dangerous criminals were those who believed they were smarter than everyone else. "What do you see that we don't?" asked Detective James Cooper, her veteran partner who had worked the previous Phantom cases. Cooper was old-school law enforcement, methodical, reliable, but lacking Mackenzie's psychological insight into criminal behavior. Mackenzie walked through the bank lobby, her sharp green eyes analyzing every detail. "He's not just stealing money, Cooper. He's proving a point. Look at the timing, 4:47 p.m., exactly 3 minutes before the security guard's scheduled round. He knows their procedures better than they do." She paused at the teller window where the crime had occurred, running her fingers along the counter. Sandra Williams said he asked about her daughter's college plans. That's not casual conversation. That's psychological manipulation. He was building rapport to reduce her suspicion about the unusual transaction. Cooper frowned, reviewing his notes. "So you think this guy has inside information?" "No," Mackenzie replied, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who understood criminal minds. "He has something more dangerous than inside information. He has the ability to analyze human behavior and exploit weaknesses that people don't even know they have." Back at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation headquarters, Mackenzie spread crime scene photos across her desk and began constructing a psychological profile. The Nashville Phantom wasn't just a thief. He was a mastermind who viewed each heist as an intellectual exercise, a way to prove his superiority over law enforcement and society itself. Her analysis revealed disturbing patterns. Each crime had been executed with increasing boldness, suggesting the perpetrator was becoming more confident and taking greater risks. This escalation indicated a psychological need for validation. The criminal was feeding off the media attention and the inability of law enforcement to catch him. "I need to brief the task force," Mackenzie told Cooper as she compiled her findings. "This isn't just about money, it's about ego, and ego is what's going to bring him down." The next morning, Mackenzie stood before a room of federal agents, local detectives, and forensic specialists. Her presentation was methodical and compelling, painting a picture of a criminal unlike any they had encountered before. "The Nashville Phantom is highly intelligent, probably college-educated, and likely maintains a respectable public persona," she explained, pointing to behavioral evidence. "From each crime scene, he's not a desperate criminal driven by financial need. He's a narcissist who commits these crimes to prove his intellectual superiority." Agent Marcus Rivera, the FBI's technical surveillance specialist, leaned forward with interest. "If he's driven by ego, he'll make mistakes. Narcissists can't resist showing off their intelligence." "Exactly," Mackenzie nodded. "And when he does, we'll be ready. I'm requesting authorization for enhanced surveillance on potential targets and monitoring of communications in the financial district. This mastermind thinks he's untouchable, but his greatest strength, his need to prove how smart he is, will become his fatal weakness." As the task force meeting concluded, Mackenzie felt the familiar thrill of the hunt beginning. She had matched wits with criminal geniuses before, and she understood that catching them required thinking like them. The Nashville Phantom had met his match, though he didn't know it yet. In the weeks that followed, Mackenzie would prove that no criminal, regardless of intelligence, could outsmart dedicated law enforcement armed with the right psychological insights and determination to see justice served. 3 miles from downtown Nashville, in the prestigious Belle Meade neighborhood, Nathaniel Blackwood lived a double life with the skill of a professional actor. His sprawling colonial mansion, valued at over $3 million, served as the perfect facade for a man who had stolen more money in 6 months than most criminals take in a lifetime. To his neighbors, Blackwood was the successful owner of Blackwood Financial Consulting, a boutique investment firm that catered to Nashville's wealthy elite. His business partner, Victoria Sterling, had no idea that the charming gentleman she worked with daily was the most wanted criminal in Tennessee. Sterling, a brilliant financial analyst with an MBA from Harvard, provided Blackwood with the perfect cover story and unshakable alibi. "Nathaniel has been with me every day this week," Sterling would later tell investigators, completely unaware that her business meetings provided Blackwood with detailed intelligence about potential targets. Through their legitimate consulting work, he gained access to financial records, security procedures, and personal information about Nashville's wealthiest residents. But Blackwood's most ambitious target wasn't a bank or investment firm. It was Judge Theodore Hammond, a federal magistrate who oversaw high-profile financial crime cases. Hammond's personal wealth, accumulated through decades of smart investments, was kept in a private vault system that Blackwood had been studying for months. The judge's security measures were extensive, but Blackwood had identified a weakness that no one else had considered. Hammond's adult son, Michael, was a gambling addict with substantial debts to dangerous people. Blackwood had been quietly gathering information about Michael's financial troubles, planning to use this leverage as part of his most elaborate heist yet. Meanwhile, Detective Mackenzie's investigation was uncovering a web of seemingly unconnected individuals who all had one thing in common. They had been robbed by someone who knew intimate details about their lives and security procedures. The pattern suggested the criminal had access to confidential financial information, but from a legitimate source. Run background checks on everyone who works in financial consulting, investment planning, or wealth management in Nashville, Mackenzie instructed her team. Our Phantom has inside knowledge, but he's not getting it from bank employees. He's getting it from someone who works with multiple wealthy clients. Cooper raised a concern that had been bothering him for weeks. Sarah, what if we're dealing with more than one person? These crimes require extensive planning, technological expertise, and intimate knowledge of different security systems. Maybe it's not a lone mastermind, maybe it's a criminal organization. Mackenzie studied the evidence board, where red string connected photos, timeline charts, and location maps. The psychological profile doesn't support multiple perpetrators, Cooper. Everything about these crimes screams narcissistic personality disorder. This is someone who needs personal credit for his genius. He wouldn't share that. Satisfaction with partners. But Mackenzie was partially wrong. While Blackwood worked alone on the actual heists, he had been carefully cultivating a network of unwitting accomplices. Victoria Sterling provided business intelligence. A corrupt security consultant named David Walsh sold him information about alarm systems. A bank IT specialist named Jennifer Liu gave him details about electronic security protocols in exchange for what she believed were legitimate consulting fees. None of these people knew they were helping a criminal. Blackwood's genius lay not just in his ability to plan perfect crimes, but in his talent for manipulating honest people into becoming unknowing participants in his schemes. The web of deception extended even further. Blackwood had been attending Nashville's most exclusive social events, charity galas, and business conferences for over a year, building relationships and gathering intelligence while hiding in plain sight among the very people he was robbing. At a recent fundraiser for the Nashville Symphony, he had charmed Judge Hammond's wife during a conversation about art collecting, learning valuable details about their home security system and daily routines. Hammond himself had no idea that the distinguished gentleman who had donated generously to the charity was planning to rob him. As Detective Mackenzie closed in on the truth, Blackwood was putting the finishing touches on his most audacious plan yet, a heist that would net him over $10 million and cement his reputation as the greatest criminal mastermind in American history. But his confidence was about to become his downfall, because Mackenzie had just made a breakthrough that would change everything. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the mastermind who thought he controlled every variable in his perfect crimes was about to discover that he had overlooked one crucial factor: the determination of a detective who refused to let genius go unpunished. In a nondescript office building 12 blocks from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation headquarters, Agent Marcus Rivera was setting up the most sophisticated surveillance operation Nashville had ever seen. His request for enhanced monitoring had been approved after Detective Mackenzie's compelling presentation about the psychological profile of their target. Rivera was a specialist in technical surveillance, with 15 years of experience tracking criminal organizations, but he had never encountered a case quite like this one. The Nashville Phantom's crimes were so perfectly executed that traditional surveillance methods had proved useless. This time, they would need to get inside the criminal's mind by listening to his private conversations. The key is patience, Rivera explained to Mackenzie as he calibrated the recording equipment. If your psychological profile is correct, his narcissism will eventually compel him to talk about his crimes. Criminals like this can't resist sharing their genius with someone, even if it's just over the phone. Mackenzie watched the technical setup with fascination. How many lines can you monitor simultaneously? We're focusing on financial district communications, high-end residential areas in Belle Meade and Green Hills, and any phone traffic related to our list of potential suspects, Rivera replied. The system can analyze thousands of conversations in real time, flagging keywords related to financial crimes, security systems, and criminal planning. What Mackenzie and Rivera didn't know was that at that exact moment, Nathaniel Blackwood was making a phone call that would change everything. From his home office, surrounded by stolen millions hidden in custom-built wall safes, He dialed a number he had memorized weeks earlier. "Michael," Blackwood said, in a voice dripping with false sympathy. "I understand you're having some financial difficulties with certain gambling debts." Michael Hammond, Judge Theodore Hammond's troubled son, felt his blood run cold. "Who is this? How do you know about my debts?" "I'm someone who can help you solve your problems," Blackwood continued, unaware that every word was being recorded by Rivera's surveillance system. "Your father has access to resources that could pay off your debts completely. All you need to do is provide me with some basic information about his security arrangements." The conversation lasted exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds. In that brief exchange, Blackwood revealed details about his surveillance of the Hammond family, his knowledge of their financial assets, and his plan to use Michael's gambling addiction as leverage for his biggest heist yet. Rivera's computer system immediately flagged the conversation for suspicious content. Within minutes, Mackenzie was listening to the recording with growing excitement and horror. They had their first direct evidence of the Nashville Phantom's voice, his methods, and his next target. "He's blackmailing the judge's son," Mackenzie said, replaying the recording for the third time. "But listen to how he talks about the father's resources. He knows specific details about Judge Hammond's private vault system. This isn't just opportunistic crime. It's been planned for months." Cooper joined them in the surveillance room, studying transcripts of the conversation. "Do we have enough to make an arrest?" "Not yet," Mackenzie replied. "The voice isn't connected to any specific identity, and he was careful not to explicitly threaten violence or describe specific criminal acts. But we know his next target, and we know he's escalating to direct manipulation of victims' family members." Rivera was already expanding the surveillance operation. "I'm putting full monitoring on the Hammond family's communications. If he contacts Michael again, we'll be ready. And I'm running voice analysis on this recording against our database of known criminals." But Blackwood's arrogance was about to make their job much easier. That evening, flush with confidence from his successful manipulation of Michael Hammond, he made another phone call, this time to a contact in his criminal network who provided him with specialized burglary equipment. "The Hammond job is moving forward ahead of schedule," Blackwood said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "The son is cooperating beautifully. Desperate people are so predictable, don't you think?" The conversation revealed crucial details about Blackwood's criminal network, his timeline for the Hammond heist, and most importantly, his growing overconfidence. He spoke with the casual arrogance of someone who believed he was untouchable, never imagining that law enforcement had the technology to listen to his every word. As Rivera's computers recorded and analyzed each conversation, Mackenzie felt the thrill of the hunt reaching its climax. The Nashville Phantom had finally made his first real mistake. He had started talking about his crimes with the casual confidence of a man who believed he could never be caught. The surveillance operation that would bring down the criminal mastermind had officially begun, and Nathaniel Blackwood was about to learn that in the modern age of electronic surveillance, no conversation is truly private. For 3 weeks, Agent Rivera's surveillance operation recorded over 40,000 phone conversations across Nashville's financial district. The sophisticated filtering system had identified 247 calls containing suspicious keywords, but none had provided the breakthrough they needed until October 15th, when Nathaniel Blackwood's arrogance finally overrode his caution. At 9:23 p.m. from his Belmead mansion, Blackwood made the phone call that would seal his fate. His contact was David Walsh, the corrupt security consultant who had been unknowingly feeding him information about alarm systems throughout the city. "David, my friend," Blackwood began, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who believed he had mastered the art of crime. "I wanted to thank you for your consultation on the Hammond security assessment. Your information about the vault's electromagnetic locks was absolutely invaluable." Detective Mackenzie, monitoring the call in real time with Rivera, felt her pulse quicken. This was the first time they had heard the Phantom's voice discussing specific criminal methods. Walsh's response revealed the scope of his unwitting collaboration. "I'm glad the security audit was helpful, Mr. Blackwood. Judge Hammond's system is one of the most sophisticated I've designed. Those electromagnetic locks are virtually impenetrable unless you know the exact frequency modulations." "Oh, I know them quite well now," Blackwood replied with chilling confidence. "Your technical specifications were so detailed that I could practically disable the entire system with my eyes closed." Mackenzie grabbed Rivera's arm. He just confessed to planning to burglarize Judge Hammond's vault, and we have his real name, Nathaniel Blackwood. But Blackwood wasn't finished incriminating himself. Intoxicated by his own cleverness, he continued describing his criminal methodology with the enthusiasm of a professor lecturing to students. The beauty of my approach, David, is that I never leave anything to chance. Take the first national job last month. I spent 3 weeks studying the teller's psychological profile. Sandra Williams was the perfect mark because she's emotionally driven and trusting. When I told her about my fictional medical emergency, she processed that withdrawal without a single question. Rivera's recording equipment captured every damning word as Blackwood detailed his previous crimes with the casual arrogance of someone describing a hobby. He revealed how he had manipulated Victoria Sterling to gain access to wealthy clients' information, how he had used social engineering to bypass security systems, and how he had planned each heist to exploit specific psychological weaknesses in his victims. The media calls me the Nashville Phantom, Blackwood continued, clearly enjoying his own notoriety. But they don't understand that I'm not just stealing money. I'm conducting a masterclass in criminal psychology. Each heist proves that human nature is more predictable than any security system. Mackenzie was frantically taking notes while Rivera ensured every word was being recorded clearly. They were witnessing a criminal mastermind's complete confession, delivered with such arrogance that he seemed to have forgotten the possibility of surveillance. The conversation took an even more disturbing turn when Blackwood began describing his manipulation of Michael Hammond. The judge's son is so desperate to pay off his gambling debts that he's willing to betray his own father. I convinced him that providing security information was just helping with a financial consultation. The psychological leverage is absolutely perfect. But the most shocking revelation came when Blackwood revealed the true scope of his criminal network. You're not the only professional who's been unknowingly helpful, David. I have a bank IT specialist who thinks she's consulting on legitimate security assessments, a social coordinator who provides guest lists for charity events, and even a law enforcement records clerk who believes she's helping with background investigations for my investment clients. Mackenzie realized they weren't just dealing with a lone criminal. They were uncovering a network of unwitting accomplices who had no idea they were facilitating some of the most sophisticated crimes in Tennessee history. The phone call lasted 47 minutes, during which Blackwood provided enough evidence to charge him with 6 separate felonies and implicate multiple unknowing accomplices in his schemes. His narcissistic need to prove his intellectual superiority had compelled him to confess to crimes that law enforcement hadn't even connected to him yet. As the call ended, Rivera looked at Mackenzie with amazement. In 20 years of surveillance work, I've never heard a criminal provide such a complete confession. His ego, literally, destroyed his operational security. Mackenzie smiled grimly. Narcissists always believe they're the smartest person in the room, but tonight, Nathaniel Blackwood proved that even criminal genius has its limitations. The mastermind who thought he was untouchable had just handed law enforcement everything they needed to bring him down. All that remained was the arrest, and Mackenzie intended to make sure Blackwood understood exactly how his own arrogance had become his fatal mistake. Dawn was breaking over Nashville on October 16th when Detective Sarah Mackenzie led a joint FBI-TBI task force to Nathaniel Blackwood's Belle Meade mansion. Armed with warrants for his arrest and search of the property, she felt the satisfaction of a chess master delivering checkmate to an opponent who had underestimated her abilities. Rivera's surveillance van was positioned across the street, monitoring any attempts at communication while backup units surrounded the property. Mackenzie knew that Blackwood's intelligence would make him dangerous even when cornered, but his arrogance had finally given them the advantage they needed. At exactly 6:47 a.m., Mackenzie rang the doorbell of the $3 million colonial mansion. When Blackwood answered, still wearing an expensive silk robe and holding a cup of coffee, his reaction was everything she had expected from a narcissistic criminal genius caught off guard. "Gentlemen, I believe you have the wrong address," Blackwood said with practiced charm, his piercing blue eyes quickly assessing the situation. Even in the moment of his capture, he was calculating angles and possibilities for escape or manipulation. "Nathaniel Blackwood," Mackenzie announced, holding up her badge and warrant. "You're under arrest for 6 counts of grand theft, conspiracy to commit burglary, blackmail, and operation of a criminal enterprise. You have the right to remain silent, though based on last night's Phone conversation with David Walsh. We know you prefer talking. The mention of the recorded phone call caused the first crack in Blackwood's composed facade. His coffee cup trembled slightly in his hand as the full implications hit him. For a man who had built his criminal career on controlling every variable, the realization that his private conversations had been monitored was devastating. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Blackwood replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "I'm a legitimate businessman with no criminal associations," Mackenzie smiled, pulling out a digital recorder. "Would you like to hear your own voice describing how you manipulated Sandra Williams at First National Bank? Or perhaps your detailed explanation of Judge Hammond's vault security system? We have 47 minutes of you confessing to crimes we hadn't even connected to you yet." As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Blackwood's intellectual arrogance finally gave way to the crushing realization of his situation. The mastermind who had believed he could outsmart any system had been undone by his own psychological need to prove his superiority. The search of Blackwood's mansion revealed the full scope of his criminal empire. Hidden wall safes contained over $4.2 million in cash from his various heists. His home office was a criminal mastermind's headquarters, complete with detailed surveillance photos of targets, psychological profiles of victims, and security system blueprints acquired through his network of unwitting accomplices. Most damaging was his personal journal, where Blackwood had documented each crime with the pride of an artist cataloging his masterpieces. Page after page revealed his psychological analysis of victims, his manipulation techniques, and his growing confidence that he was untouchable. "Listen to this entry from 3 weeks ago," Cooper said, reading from the journal. "Law enforcement continues to bumble around looking for clues, while I execute crimes that would be impossible for their limited intellects to solve. I am operating on a level of criminal sophistication that they cannot even comprehend." Mackenzie shook her head at the sheer arrogance documented in Blackwood's own handwriting. His greatest strength was also his fatal weakness. He couldn't resist proving how smart he was, even to himself. The arrest of Nathaniel Blackwood sent shockwaves through Nashville's criminal underworld and law enforcement community alike. His network of unwitting accomplices, Victoria Sterling, David Walsh, Jennifer Liu, and others, faced potential charges as investigators determined the extent of their knowledge about his criminal activities. Judge Theodore Hammond, learning how close he had come to being victimized, personally thanked Mackenzie for her psychological insight and investigative persistence. His son Michael, freed from Blackwood's blackmail, entered a treatment program for his gambling addiction. But as Blackwood was processed into the Davidson County Jail, he made one final statement that left everyone present unsettled. Looking directly at Mackenzie with his piercing blue eyes, he said, "Detective, you think you've won this game, but you have no idea how deep this really goes. I may be finished, but the network I created will continue operating long after I'm imprisoned." Rivera's final analysis of the surveillance tapes would later reveal that Blackwood had made over 200 phone calls to numbers that couldn't be traced, suggesting criminal connections that extended far beyond Nashville. Some of those contacts had been made using sophisticated voice-altering technology that had initially escaped detection. As Mackenzie watched the transport van carry Blackwood to jail, she felt both satisfaction and unease. They had caught the Nashville Phantom, but his parting words suggested that the mastermind's criminal legacy might continue even from behind bars. The case that had started with a perfect crime had ended with a perfect arrest. But in the world of criminal masterminds, endings are rarely as final as they appear. Sometimes the greatest criminals are those who plan for their own capture, leaving behind networks and contingencies that ensure their work continues long after they're gone.